Okay, today we will take a very deep look into managing button boxes, stream decks, and other controllers. As always, if you have any questions, please jump in. Otherwise, I will keep talking. We have seen already in the session for setup and configuration a little bit about button boxes and Stream Decks, but this was only touching of the surface, so-called. So today we will go a lot deeper. Let's start simulator setup. As you probably know, you can connect every USB capable controller to simulator controller and manage them as input devices for all the modules and plugins simulator controller provides. A typical USB controller is, for example, also your steering wheel. So you can use all the buttons, dials, and so on from your steering wheel, but you can also use button boxes, stream decks. And if you don't have anything of these, there are also the possibility to configure your keyboard as a kind of controller, but this is not the topic of today. Okay, so step forward. We have selected all modules currently so that we have enough actions available. Then we will take a look here at the presets for the first time. Here you have different default layouts which you can use as a starting point for your own configuration work. You will have three different ones for typical button box layouts. No worry if this is not exactly the way your button box looks like, but you can change everything afterwards. But choose the one which fits your connected controller the most. The same is here for the Stream Deck. These are the standard Stream Deck layouts for the three different devices which you can buy from Elgato. So choose the one you want to configure here. If you don't use anything of these and step forward, you can still create everything on your own, but you will have start with a blank page. Here, if in the controller configuration, you will have no predefined controls, no labels, and for sure, no button boxes or other controllers. So we go back here and use this button box here and standard Stream Deck layout. And now we see that they have been copied to our configuration as a starting point or default configuration so that we can work with these. I will create a new one, an additional third one, just to show you how to do this. We name this, for example, steering wheel. It will be a kind of button box, although it's my steering wheel, no problem. I will not make it visible. This means that there is no preview window later available to show you what's available on your button box. You will see the difference later on when we work with a predefined button box. You can have some window open on one of your screens to show you what's currently associated with the different buttons. But for the steering wheel, we will not do this. Then we say we have on the steering wheel two rows of two buttons. So we have four controls available. And this little window will be created with four spaces for rent for controls you can now create for your steering wheel. Controls are defined here in the upper area. The 4 that are already there have been copied from the presets. A control is something like a control type for simulator controller. 4 different control types are supported here. One-way toggle buttons, one-way toggle switches, two-way toggle switches, simple buttons and dials. You can give these controls a kind of image, which will be shown here. For example, if I select here the push, this one, as a control at this place, I will get this image, which you can select from a collection of predefined images from my software, but you can also import your own images here. This is more the same for all the other controls. Then you can also define labels, which can be used to give you a small text field where you can see later on in the preview window which action from simulator controller is currently associated with this control. We will choose here the standard label which has been defined, but you can have also different labels. For example, a small one which is only 40 by 20, let's say. We add this and use here a rotary dial and the small label. This would look a little bit weird if you have different label sizes in one button box, but it is possible. Otherwise, I recommend to use labels of the same size for all your controls. So let's configure more here. We'll have a different rotary and another one. What we still have to do is we have to give all these controls individual numbers. That's a very important concept to understand, that each control in this controllers define at the first step so-called logical controls. A logical control is something which can be triggered from the outside, for example, by pressing a physical button on the button box or pressing a key on the keyboard, or even calling a voice command. And these logical controls can then trigger on their own a function in the simulator controller software. Each logical control of a given type must have a unique number to be identified. And you can see here we have a conflict because we have 2 times the button with the number 1 defined, or we have several conflicts here, 2 times with the button number 1, 2 times the button with the dial with number 1, and so on. So we have to change this. We will choose here a high number, let's say 31. So we resolved already some of the conflicts. We will choose here the number 4 for this dial and the number 5 for this one. You can also hold down the control key while clicking on a control, and you will get a dialog where you can enter the number by keyboard. This might be a little bit faster than navigating through the context menu. Okay, still one conflict here. Where is it? Ah, here. Okay. Control number 3. Okay, all conflicts resolved. So we have now two different button boxes, or one button box and some buttons on our steering wheel. And we have a Stream Deck, which we can also use to then associate the functions of simulator controller. The next step is now to define the triggers which will trigger these logical controls here. For the Stream Deck, there's nothing to do besides creating a Stream Deck profile. We will come to that later on. And to install a Stream Deck plugin in the Stream Deck software, which is provided. This plugin is provided by Simulator Controller. You can find the reference in the documentation. But for all the buttons here, you have to say which physical button on your button box or your steering wheel will trigger this, and this is easy. You can click here on one of the logical controls. I already done this. You see this little window which scans for pressed controls on your button box, and now I will choose one of my controls, and it says, okay, on the third connected joystick it was the control number 1. We will do this now for the second one. Now this is a two-way toggle. It will request two different triggers. The first is for the on position. And now it's asking for the second. And now you see we have two triggers, one for on, one for off. The same here. And so on. I will not finish this now because for the later work I will load a predefined configuration so we can skip this time-consuming work. One word about dials. Dials are also binary controls. You have moving left and moving right. It's a little bit nasty to associate dial because you have to rotate the dial all the time while the software is looking for a currently triggered control, and it will take some time until the dial is detected. But don't give up. After 30 to 50 seconds, I always managed to associate the dial correctly. Okay. Let's take a look at the Stream Deck. Here's not much to do. The same here is you can associate different numbers, but you cannot associate a control here because every control on a Stream Deck is a button. So there are always buttons, as you can see here. Button number 21, button number 22, and so on. But for Stream Deck, you have other things to do, or you may do other things, because you can display text and icons on the Stream Deck. And you can say here what will be displayed on this concrete button. And here we have the possibility to associate a label and or an icon. The default is that both the label and the icon will be provided by the associated action. For example, if you associate the action plan pit stop with the button on the Stream Deck, you can define an icon for this action, and you can also define a label text for this action, which might then be displayed on the Stream Deck. But you can also say that you want to have a fixed label completely independent of what is currently associated with this button. The same is for icons, is possible for icons. And we have some rules here which can be given, which means the first one, if an icon is present, only the icon will be shown, otherwise the label will be shown. This rule says show both, and so on. There are more rules which can be defined, icon-specific and action-specific. We will come to that. For most of the time, the default, which you don't have to change the default for most of the time. This is only possible, necessary for icons which are created to show also some text in there which is provided by the label. Okay, so now I've talked a lot about that it is possible to associate actions from simulator controller or functions from simulator controller with the buttons on the button boxes and the Stream Deck. And I also have said that the association can change. And we will come to this now. I will skip this for the moment and use the Assetto Corsa Competizione simulator to show you this. We now will have all created controllers available to play with. Move this a little bit away. And here in Simulator Setup, at this page and the following pages, you will see a list of all available actions. In this case, for the Assetto Corsa Competizione simulator, or if we skip here to the next page, all the actions which are available for the race engineer and so on. And now you can every time I have to move this window back to the screen. Sorry for that. Now you can associate this action or any other action with one of these controls here. Before I do this, I will talk a little bit about the concept of modes and plugins. Plugins are all components of the simulator controller software suite which defines some functionality. For example, there are plugins for each simulator. You have a plugin for Assetto Corsa Competizione, for example. But there are also plugins for all the race assistants. And there are plugins to control motion rigs, there are plugins to control vibration motors, and so on and so on. A plugin can define actions on the plugin level, which means that this action is always available. For example, no, I will not do this now because then the windows will move again to the main screen. But we will see this later on when we take a look at the Race Engineer plugin or module. Here we have the other case where all the actions defined are available in a so-called mode. A mode is something which is similar to a layer of controls which are available as a group on your controller device. For example, the pit stop mode here defines a set of commands for Assetto Corsa Competizione which will be available when you're out on the track and which allow you to control the settings in your pit stop dialog. This mode might be visible on a given button box depending on your current selection. We will see how to select the mode in a few minutes. Let's first create some associations here. For example, we want to have the strategy associated with the dial because we want to move left and right with the strategy. We click here and you see it is associated. Now we want to have the refuel amount associated with this dial. We want to increase the tire pressures for all four tires at the same time. This is this action here with this button. Now you can choose because it's a two-way action that we want to associate this button with increase. You see, increase pressure. The same here for decrease. If you associated a binary action with a binary control, for example here, tire front left, with this one, you will see plus, minus will be handled by this binary toggle switch. If you push it up, you will increase the pressure. If you push it down, you will decrease the pressure. Okay, now we have defined this mode here. If we select another mode as a preview here, you see these associations will disappear because now we have the assistant mode active for this button box in the preview mode. How to switch with this later on in a running software. We will come to that, sorry. And now we can go and associate some assistant commands. For example, plan the pit stop. Prepare the pit stop. And so on. Okay. You can do this for the other controllers as well. Just to show it, set function, recommend pit stop here. What you can also do, and what is very helpful in some situations, you can associate more than one command or action with a given control, so that pressing this button triggers one or more actions at the same time. Will you show this in a few seconds as well? Okay, any questions so far? Seems not, so...
No.
No? Okay. Then we will switch to the race engineer. Move the controllers back here. And as I said, the race engineer does not define any mode, which means that all the actions you have available here will be bound to a given control all the time. Not the most important, but a very important action is, for example, this one, the race assistant action, with which you can enable or disable a given race assistant. We will set this here. As you can see, it's also an on and off, a two-way command. And now if we switch this toggle up, we will enable the race engineer. If we push it down, we will disable the race engineer. And this is the thing I mentioned before. When I now go to the race strategist, I can associate the same action, which is available for the race strategist, the on and off switch for the strategist, with the same toggle switch. So now you can switch the engineer and the strategist on and off with one and the same toggle switch, which might be helpful. I have a control like this if I don't want the assistants to be active, for example, during a practice session. I switch this toggle off and all the race assistants are off. Okay. When we now go back to the simulator configuration and to take a look back here at the button box, you see, because the race assistant actions are plugin actions and are available therefore globally, that they will be shown here as well so that you can see which controls are already bound anywhere else. But the modes stay what the modes are. You can switch between them, as you can do later on when running the software. Okay, that's for button boxes. Now take a little deeper look into the Stream Deck. To do this, I will first go to the configuration of the motion feedback, because the configuration is available here. Here you have a button named Edit Labels and Icons. If you click this, you will get this editor. This editor will give you the possibility to edit all the label texts for all the actions of all plugins, so that you can change it to your needs. Maybe you are not satisfied with one of the namings I have chosen, want to change them, no problem. Select it and change it. And you can also associate your own icons here to be shown later on the Stream Deck. Simply click here on the icon and you will get a browser to where you can navigate to your icon folder and choose the icon you want. These icons you see here are bundled with a simulator controller and can be imported from a preset. I have already done this, so the icons are available already. If you don't import this preset, the icon field will be empty. So you have to define all the icons on your own. As I said, you can here define the labels and icons for all the plugins, all the modules of Simulator Controller. A lot of them, but it's possible. These icons and these labels is what we have seen before as label action and icon action definitions when you have created the Stream Deck. The other thing you can do, and now we have to go back to the controller definition. Is that you can create additional display rules for your Stream Deck. This is a very complicated thing, and I only will touch the surface for now so that you have seen that it is there. If you want to play with this, I strongly recommend reading the corresponding documentation and do some experiments here. The display rules is something that you can say for a given Stream Deck layout or for all layouts, for all buttons or for a specific button. That you want to have for a very individual icon, let's say this one. A different display rule as defined by the controller definition. The standard display rule, I will close this, one moment please. The standard display rule you can find here. It's icon or label at default. But as you can see, we can say for button 21, for this specific icon, we want the icon and labels, which means when a label is defined and an icon is defined, the icon will be shown and the label text will be overlaying the icon. When do you need this? Maybe you have an icon which is kind of a background. It's only a color. You only want to have a color in your Stream Deck, a standard color, light blue, for example, and you want to display all the label texts as they are displayed here in the button box, in the label field. Then you can do this way. There are a lot more possibilities. Please consult the documentation. Okay. Then, next thing here. We have talked a lot about modes already. We have seen the pit stop mode, we have seen the assistant mode and other plugins, for example, the motion feedback plugin or the vibration control plugin define also their own modes. And you have seen that you can associate a given button many times for many modes. And there are several ways to switch a mode on a given button box or on a given controller. The most obvious one is that you associate one of the controls as a so-called mode selector. Mode selector is a special control which, when you press it, will trigger a mode switch on this given controller. We will do this here in the general configuration page. We set this control as a mode selector, and you see here, this is the mode selector for this control, and if you want to have it for other controls as well, for example here, button 21, set mode selector, and this is the mode selector for this Stream Deck. You don't have to have a mode selector, because there's a different functionality so that you can define rules when a given mode should be visible depending on the context of what you are currently doing. For example, you will have a mode to launch different applications from a button box, which is the obvious mode when no simulation is running. Whereas when you are in a simulation on the track in a race session, the obvious mode might be the pit stop mode to be available on your button box. We will also see this later on, how to do this. Yeah. That said, we will step a little bit through the other modules. Race bottom. Okay, for example here, the plugin for controlling motion feedbacks. You have one independent, let's say, plugin level action, which allows you to enable or disable your motion rig. We will associate with this one. And you have a motion mode that's more or less similar to the pit stop mode, which you can choose on your button box to control the intensity of several motion effects, which you can dial in while you are on the track, for example. The same is true here for tactile feedback. You have two modes for controlling pedal vibration or chassis vibration, and you have independent actions to be associated all of the time to enable or disable different vibration effects. And so on and so on. Any questions here before I switch to a full-blown configuration?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, great. So then give me a few seconds. So now we will take a look at my own configuration. Restarting simulator setup. Yeah. Okay, now it's starting. One remark here. As I said, there is a preset of all the Stream Deck icons. So when you choose a Stream Deck here to work with, don't forget to import the icons as well. Otherwise, you won't have any default icons, which is not a good idea. Almost all actions have some predefined icons to play with. Yeah, that's it. Okay, here is a different thing to note. As you can see here, beside having a real hardware trigger for each of my buttons, I also have associated some of them with triggers from the keyboard and also with triggers from as voice commands. This is something you can do with this context menu here, where you can enter more than one trigger separated by vertical bars if you need something like this. Okay, that's this. Another thing you can see here is that I have associated a lot of applications which is available to simulator controller to control, for example, Fanalab with buttons on the button box. And if you do this, if you add the first application here, a mode called Launchpad will be created automatically for you. Also to have it available on your button box. Okay, seen this. And I think all the other stuff we have already talked about. So now I will start simulator startup, and you can see all this live and in action. Because I have said that the two button boxes I have defined are visible in the controller definition, they will open preview windows so that you can see while you are out on the track which is currently associated with which button. For the Stream Deck, this is obvious because the Stream Deck shows you this on the display. For example, currently we have it takes a few seconds for the first time. No, not working. Demonstration effect. We'll restart. Ah, there you go. So, no preview necessary for Stream Deck. This is obvious because you will see them as icons on the Stream Deck. But for the button box, it's quite handy to see what is currently associated with the button so that you know what will happen when you press it.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, go on.
In the Stream Deck application, how did you define the keys?
Ah, great question. Yes, I forgot it. Okay, right. Just quit simulator controller so that we can see that. What you have to do is, thank you for this question, Peter. What you have to do is you have to create one or more profiles in your Stream Deck. The plugin which is provided by Simulator Controller will define one Stream Deck action you can use for every button in your Stream Deck profile. And the only thing you have to do is to name the same button which you have named in the configuration in Simulator Setup. You remember we started with button 21 for this Stream Deck. The next one is button 22 and so on. That's it. You don't have to associate any other functionality. Everything else will be controlled by Simulator Controller. The association is by name. What you can see here, I have two additional buttons which I spared to go back to my main profile, which is the start profile. This is my main profile. And the second button switches between two pages here I have in the Simulator Controller profile, because in the simulator setup I defined two Stream Deck layouts for different functionalities, which I can switch during my active session. So, recap. You only have to create the buttons here by dragging the controller function action into the button here in Stream Deck and name the button the same as you have named it in the simulator setup configuration. Unfortunately, I cannot create these profiles. It's a binary format. Otherwise, I would have done this. So you have to do this on your own. Okay, now let's restart simulator startup. And now you see the Stream Deck is controlled by a simulator controller, and you have two pages here with different actions associated, which you can switch on the live Stream Deck using this button. I press it currently. These are the assistance or information page where I can query my race assistance about different lap time gaps and so on. And this is the control page where I can plan a pit stop, prepare a pit stop, and other stuff.
What action have you associated with that switch button? For the
No
pages?
action, no action. I show you again.
But I mean in the Stream Deck
No,
software.
no, here
Okay.
nothing. It's from Stream Deck itself. It's named. Oh, where is it? System. No. Geh jetzt zur Seite auf German. Go to page.
Yeah. Go to page. Okay.
Go to page. So you can switch the pages.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So now we can see these mode selectors at work. I will, for example, switch here the mode selector. And you see that the bindings of the buttons will change to the pedal vibration mode. And you can skip through all the modes that are available. Interesting thing is, here you have a mode, the launch mode, which spans 2 button boxes. The launch mode is active on both button boxes because I have associated buttons on this button box from the mode, and I have associated buttons on this button box from the mode. There are 3 different things you can do. You can have a mode which uses only buttons on one button box. In this case, you can switch the mode on this button box independently from the mode on this button box. I've done this. This button box now has the pedal vibration modes currently associated. And this button box currently has no mode at all because the launch mode disappeared, because it disappeared here as well. And I can select another mode here by clicking on the mode selector. Unfortunately, I don't have any local mode which is only available on this button box, but you can do it. When I click here on the mode selector, it will go back to the only mode which is currently available here, which is the launch mode. Okay. Give me a short second. I must activate the debug mode of the simulator controller so that we can see all the modes which are currently inactive. The pit stop mode is currently not available in the normal operation mode because we are running no simulation, but I have a debug mode which I can activate. I don't remember the command currently, so I have to look it up. Okay, Control Alt D. Okay. Now we have enabled the debug mode, and now we can switch to normally currently inactive modes as well. For example, we now have a pit stop mode. No, not the pit stop mode. It's chassis vibration, pedal calibration. Yes, now we have a pit stop mode here, which is defined for one of the simulators, but it's grayed out because currently this action cannot be activated because the simulation is not running. Okay, so you see a lot of modes available, and as I mentioned before, you can either switch them manually by pressing a button or a toggle switch, or you can define some rules to do this. And therefore, I will start now simulator settings, which are the settings for the simulator startup process. So with this one, you define what the simulator startup will do and how the simulator controller will function. What you can do here is, for example, you can disable or enable these button box previews, or you can say, whenever I have switched a button, pressed a button on a button box, the button box visual, this window, should appear for 1.5 seconds, and then it should disappear again. When you enter 4 nines, it is synonym for stay open forever, which I have chosen because I have plenty of screen space available. You can also say where the button boxes, these windows, should show up. Last position, which means when you move them around, this will be stored in the configuration. Or you could say always open top left, top right, or on a secondary screen, or whatever you want. But this is the thing I want to go to, the controller automation. The controller automation allows you, depending on your currently active simulator or no simulator at all, and there, depending on the currently active session type, for example, practice, qualification, or other might be hot lab mode or something like this, which of the modes on your button boxes should be automatically activated. And for example, if I am in Assetto Corsa Competizione in a race session, the pit stop mode will be automatically activated on my button box, and that's it. When I'm inactive, in no simulation at all, the system launch mode, this is the one where you can, for example, start Motec by a press of the button, should be active, and so on and so on. So you can configure a set of available modes on your button boxes for any possible situation you can have when playing with your simulation games. Okay, that was this. And now, to wrap everything up, we will go to the simulator configuration tool, which a couple of you are still using or are using besides simulator setup. Simulator setup, to mention this again, is the more simple wizard, which allows you to create a configuration by point and click, whereas simulator configuration is more capable but requires a lot of low-level knowledge about the plugins, modes, and all the configuration stuff. But you can do much more with this tool. Before I started, I will show you the documentation. All the things I talked about today you can find here. Every plugin has its own documentation, and all the modes which are available for the given plugin are documented here. For example, if you take a look at ACC, where are we? Race Spotter. Okay, here starts the documentation for the ACC plugin. First, the different modes are described: pit stop mode, chat mode, assistant mode, and then you have an overview of the configuration arguments, the configuration parameters, which you have to use when you work with simulator configuration. You will have an overview over all available actions, what they do, and how you have to configure them, and so on. A lot of stuff to read, sorry for that as always, but a lot of functionality available. Okay, so let's start simulator configuration. Most of the stuff you want to do here is in the plugins tab. For example, let's take a look at the ACC plugin. Here you can see the pit stop commands parameter, which names a lot of the actions we have seen in the simulator setup as well. For example, the refuel action, which will be associated with dial number 1. The optional argument 5 here means that you want to increase the fuel amount by 5 liters with each rotation of the dial. Tire change, or which means do you want to change tires or do you not want to change tires, is associated with button number 1. Here you can see a simple button which can handle a twofold action. The tire change can be either on or off, but we haven't associated a binary control here, but only a single press button. But this still works because with each press you will toggle between on and off. Same for brake change and so on and so on. So everything we have done here by point and click can you do here by editing the configuration arguments. The same is true for the controller configuration. There you have this tab where you can define your controller layouts. As you have seen before, all is totally similar to the way you have the way it is has been done in simulator setup. Same functionality. And you can create all the logical controls which can be used here on the controllers. But in contrast to simulator setup, here you really have to create them on your own. On the other hand, here you don't have to create these controller layout things if you don't want them. You can simply create some logical buttons and associate them with a physical trigger on one of your hardware controllers, and you're done. You will not have a preview window though, but it will work. For example here, I first have to close this one. For example here you have the logical button number 1, which will be triggered by the 11th control on the 3rd USB controller, which are always named joystick for reasons of the underlying software, and it can also be activated by pressing the left control key together with the left Alt key and 1. We have seen in the session on general setup and configuration what hotkey syntax is available here, and you can also find this in the documentation. I will not go deeper at this topic here currently. So you can do this everything on your own manually here, but as always, I recommend to start with simulator setup until you have a working configuration you are fine with. And after you're getting more and more knowledge about the inner workings of simulator controller, you can use the simulator configuration to do the low-level stuff and do some more tricks which are only available using the low-level configuration parameters. Okay, I think I have told you everything about the topic? Any questions open remaining?
I'm sure many will follow
Many will follow, as always.
when we start experimenting, but I think not for this moment.
Yeah. Okay, then I will stop the recording of the session. So goodbye to all out there.